Warning: the following episode discusses the year 2000 horror film Isola, Multiple Personality Girl, and contains discussions of real-world tragedies and of various mental disorders. A complete list of content warnings can be found in the episode description. Please, proceed with caution. This is Take 2. Hello and welcome to Take 2, a semi-weekly show offering critical analysis and contextualization of those films which, for one reason or another, have not made it onto the main feed. This is a space to talk about short films, about shot-on-video films, about direct-to-video and direct-to-DVD films. On today's episode, we'll be talking about January 2000's Isola, Multiple Personality Girl, the first of many J-horror films that we'll be covering on this show. When I was setting out to do this whole project, I was sort of putting together a list in my mind of the various the various movements that are happening within horror throughout this decade, and of course you've got in the early parts of the decade, we're seeing a lot of post-Scream slasher films. We're seeing a lot of sort of meta slashers, some would call them. In the mid and late 2000s, we get to we begin to see a lot of sequels and reboots, and then of course there's also the resurgence of found footage horror, sort of in the mid to late 2000s. We also see the rise of torture porn, and of course we are also going to see the a glut of American adaptations of foreign horror films. So we're of course going to see The Ring, we're going to see The Grudge, we're also going to see Quarantine, the absolutely abysmal remake of the Spanish film Wreck. Isola, Multiple Personality Girl, has managed to miss this wave of American remakes. Well, I mean, kind of. Actually, as I was watching the film, I made a wee note that M. Night Shyamalan had obviously watched this and thought, yeah, I could do that. There seems to be a running theme so far in Take 2 of Western directors who are receiving critical acclaim for the work of foreign filmmakers. I'm joking, of course. I don't actually believe that M. Night Shyamalan watched this film and remade it into Split. Nor do I think that David Lynch watched The House with Arched Windows and thought, yep, I'm going to go out and make Inland Empire. But I think that it's interesting to note the different ways that we talk about films made by Westerners versus how we talk about films made by people in the rest of the world, really. Isola is a film about, like a lot of the films that I have covered so far, Isola is a film about tragedy. It is a film about trauma. It is a film about the ways that traumas reach outwards, ripple outwards, and affect individuals, affect whole communities, whole cities, and whole countries. what I was sort of most impressed by in this film was its opening moments. The the sort of first act, maybe even the first half of the film, I found really intriguing in their depiction of a earthquake, an earthquake ruined Japan. The filmmakers made the absolutely excellent choice to open this film with archival footage of the earthquakes in Kobe, Japan, in the mid-90s. As somebody here living in Christchurch, New Zealand, it was very easy for me to buy into this film. Let's say, for those of you who do not know, I am based in Christchurch, New Zealand. Christchurch is one of the largest cities in New Zealand. It is located in the South Island, and we are, I suppose, most famous in the world for two things. The first was a series of earthquakes that began in 2011, which decimated the city, just absolutely brought the city to its knees. We are here in 2023, just sort of, back to full operation, back to capacity. There are still whole areas of the city that are cornered off, that we are, unable to enter or unable to build on, because the land is just too unstable. And if there was to be another earthquake, God forbid, then it would just be an absolute disaster. And so we are still in the process of rebuilding in a lot of ways. The other thing that Christchurch is most known for is a recent mass shooting, a shooting that took place in a mosque, literally a block over from my house at the time. As I said, Isola is a film about tragedy and about trauma, and the ways that these things intersect. And I said that I found it really easy to buy into the film in its opening moments, and it is because of my personal experiences with these two events that made this possible for me. I was lucky, let's say. I don't know how else to phrase it, really. The earthquakes did not personally affect me, other than some sort of superficial damage to my family home. We were, for the most part, we were untouched. I didn't know anybody who passed away. I didn't know anybody who lost family. I didn't know anybody that had lost their homes or their livelihoods. I was spared a lot of the true horrors of what had happened in the earthquakes. And the same goes for the mosque attacks as well. I said that I lived a block away from the site, but other than being locked down for an afternoon, again, I did not personally know anybody who lost family members in this time. I don't know anybody who was truly affected by it, but I'm saying all of this sort of, I guess, to just add a little bit of context. I don't want to sound as though I cannot speak on behalf of the people that were, properly affected by these two events. I cannot. I It would be wrong for me to even attempt to do so. So when I talk about my experiences, when I go into more detail about sort of what happened in the immediate wake of these two events, I guess I want it to be clear that there are people who had it far, far worse than I ever did. And really it should be them who I guess is talking about it. But as I said, Isola, opens with archival footage of the Kobe earthquakes and the sort of immediate aftermath of the quakes. And it does this because the first half of the film is set, well, I mean, the entire film is set in this post-earthquake city, but the first act is really about the survivors of these quakes and the people that have gone there to help them and to lend a hand. What I think Isola does really, really well is depicting this aftermath. It does a great job of showing the quiet sadness that comes in the wake of a tragedy of this magnitude. The sort of the uncertainty of what comes next. Following the earthquakes in 2011, my father and I, the earthquakes happened around midday, and I was at school. I was a high school student, and we got locked down. We got moved outside onto a field after the earthquakes, and we were sat outside for hours, just sort of waiting for news. And I distinctly remember looking towards the city and seeing these like pillars of smoke that were rising up where buildings had once stood. And I remember just the quiet desperation of people. There was immediately after the earthquakes, there was obviously this rush of action. Everybody was up and moving, and was, there was, okay, let's get to these assembly points. Let's make sure that everybody's there. Where are your friends? Where are your loved ones? Where are people? Everybody was rushing around trying to do the best that they could. But once all of that had died down, and once it had become sort of clear what had happened, it really became kind of just a waiting game. We were obviously phone lines and things like that were down. We were unable to get a lot of information from the internet, or from a lot of people were trying to call family and were unable to. I personally wasn't able to contact anyone until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The earthquakes happened around about 11 o'clock, if memory serves. And so from then until around sort of 4:30 in the afternoon, I was alone. I had my friends with me, I had my teachers with me and things like that, but My mother, my father, they had no idea where I was. They had no idea if I was safe, if I was okay. And likewise for me, I didn't know where my father was. I didn't know whether or not he was, safe. And there was no way to know. There was, as I said, phone lines are down, the internet's down. Everybody is trying to reach out and to make contact, and the systems are just getting overwhelmed. And so instead, all that you could do was wait. All that you could do was sit and, refresh the page, and, every 10 minutes, every half hour, you would get, another snippet of information. You would get some other little piece. And it became, it was dreadful. It was really, really hard to sit there, especially when the shape of the thing became clear, once deaths started to be reported, and once the magnitude of the whole thing was publicly was made publicly available. That evening, after the earthquakes, my father and I went back to my school, actually. The gymnasium there, the auditorium there, they had been set up as, crisis centers, just places for people who had nothing. It was a place for them to go and get, the help that they needed. And my father and I went along as volunteers, and watching this film, and seeing this this rec center turned into a makeshift crisis center, it struck home. It really hits. Just the images of families just sat on the floor, trying to just go on, and all the while thinking, what the hell comes next? What do we do? I'm so tired, and I'm, so overwhelmed. And that just hits. Like, that's just true. I don't know how else to put it. It's undermined a little bit in the film by the sudden outburst of violence that happens, the pushing and shoving when some of the volunteers are seen to be like overstepping. That was that stood out as a really sort of a bit cheap, a bit hack. But before that, the rest of it, that all really, really worked. What Isola does so well is it does a great job of conveying the pressure that is put on you in these moments, and the ways that this one big, tragedy, it brings back all of these little traumas, within you. It brings up every bad thing that you have, that you worry about, that you have been worrying about. And it amplifies all of it. The film is, I think, at its best when it's being quiet. The quiet moments of intimacy between the main character Yukari and the old man who she meets at the center. Just the quiet moment of her bandaging Chihiro's wounds, bandaging her arm. That's when this film sings. That's when it shines. Where it stumbles a bit is in its depiction of mental illness. This is yet another film, yet another horror film to depict dissociative identity disorder as being, just this like an engine for horror, an engine for violence. Like Split, the titular Isola, a girl who is primarily called Chihiro. She is a character with multiple personalities. She has a total of 13, and she has 12 that she cycles through sort of on the regular, and then she has a 13th personality that is just an instrument of violence, is just a overwhelmingly cruel entity. And you see why I draw comparisons between this and Split. It's essentially the same exact setup for that character's illness in that film. Like so many of these films, Isola makes the mistake of presenting multiple personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, as the result of sexual abuse, of childhood traumas of various kinds. Chihiro was in a car accident as a child, and this is both of her parents died, and this is part of the reason that she has developed these alternate personalities, but it is primarily the result of the sexual abuse that she has suffered at the hands of her uncle, her sort of adoptive father, following her parents' death. And it's just, it's very cheap. It's very, to quote Stephen King, it's going for the gross out in a really kind of perfunctory way. It's very predictable. The moment that it started to sort of be alluded to that Chihiro was being abused, I audibly groaned. I was watching this film in chunks at work, and I was sitting in the break room and I audibly groaned, and I then immediately had to explain to some of my colleagues why I had done that. Yeah. It's just, I was honestly pretty disappointed in that sort of aspect of the film. It has, there were moments early on. What I think the filmmakers were going for was to show the ways that mental illness is demonized in day-to-day life, the ways that people with mental illness are scrutinized by those around them. And in some places I think that this works, but in others it really, really just doesn't. One of the best moments, I think, is in the not the bus, but the sort of the Humvee leaving the town center and heading sort of outward, taking people to their jobs, just taking them elsewhere. There is a scene where the main character, Yukari, she drops her medication, the antipsychotics that she has been prescribed as a way of sort of helping to manage her psychic abilities. She goes to take one of the pills, but in her haste she drops the pills, and the man next to her picks them up to like give them back. But we see that as he realizes what they are, when he realizes that they are antipsychotics, he immediately becomes sort of repulsed by Yukari, and he sort of makes it a point to distance himself from her in the scene. And I think that is a moment where, where the filmmakers achieved what they set out to. But the depictions of Chihiro and of her alternate personalities, unfortunately, it sort of just fell a bit flat for me. In conclusion, Isola is a land of contrasts. I'd like to thank Janka Glonis for the use of her track Axe Murderess off of the album Funtime Party Gal. A link to that album and to their Bandcamp can be found in the episode description. If you have any comments or queries regarding the show and you want to get in touch, you can do that on Twitter at Most Maligned or via email mostmaligned@gmail.com. If you could please take a moment to leave a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice, I would really appreciate it. Good word of mouth is so important in helping to increase the show's listenership, especially in these early days. Next week, we'll be discussing February 2000's Uzumaki, the live-action adaptation of horror icon Junji Ito's seminal work. And here on Take 2, we'll be covering the February 2000 film Ringu Zero, the fifth Ring film. Until then, though, this has been Take 2.